Bell's decade menu is back, and this time it's focused on that crazy time period that we called Y2K. If you or a loved one experienced emotional distress due to slow internet 25 years ago, Taco Bell believes you're entitled to a delicious escape. With Taco Bell's decades Y2K menu, you get 5 faves like the cool ranch Doritos Locos Taco, caramel apple empanada, chili cheese burrito, 7-layer burrito, or double-decker taco, all for $3 or less. You already suffered dial-up. Don't wait any longer. Experience Taco Bell's Decades Y2K menu now. Also, don't forget to add on a $7 Buffs box with 4 Taco Bell classics and a collectible CU Player Cup featuring Jordan Seaton, Juju Lewis, Draylon Miller, or Quentin Gibson. And we want to shout out Taco Bell because every time CU scores a touchdown this year, Taco Bell will help support CU athletics with a $1,000 donation to the Golden Buffaloes Scholarship Fund. Live Moss at Taco Bell. All right, welcome into a new Buff Stampede Radio. Adam Munsterteiger, the publisher of BuffStampede.com, joined by senior staff writer Sean Niehoff, who has been there every step of the way through this early part of the season. And Sean, I'm just going to lead off. I'm going to ask you how you're doing later. I got to lead off with your impressions of the Iowa State game since we didn't get a chance to talk to you on Sunday.
Yeah, I think right along with everybody else, I think it was definitely, I think Salter's best performance of the season. Caden Salter had a really good second half. The beginning of the game was shaky, but I'm still left even after that game with I think there are still more questions than there are answers with this team on both sides of the ball. It seems like they still are struggling to really establish an identity. I think we know that they want to run the ball, and at times they can do it, but at times it's they're just banging their head against the wall. I don't love a lot of what they're doing scheme-wise offensively and defensively. They just seem to still lack the ability to stop opponents, to get the ball back, to get off the field. And even in the game, and rewatching the film as well, it was Iowa State's inability to make plays and so many missed passes and dropped balls and things that I didn't expect to see out of Rocco Becht coming into this game that really kind of stopped them. So I think we're still left with this is a team that can win any game, they can lose any game, and it's I don't know that we know a whole lot more about them 7 weeks into the season than we did 2 months ago.
Well, I think that there are some pieces coming together, but yes, the total picture of things is still very much hard to kind of grasp your hands on.
Right.
And we'll get into the schedule later. This, like you said, every game Colorado could win or lose going forward. That's going to be the same case the next 5 weeks. We're going to break down the difficulty of that, but that kind of stays in line with how this season's been, how it's going to be going, just in terms of Colorado's talented enough to win any of these games. They really are. What should expectations be? They're sitting at 3-4, 1-3 in conference play. It's hard to envision a path to the Big 12 championship game. But despite some of the frustrations early this season, Sean, you can clearly map out a path for this team going to a bowl game.
Oh, absolutely. And I still expect that. I think we all saw this team, at least you and I and some of the media people saw this team as, having the potential to win 8 games, 9 games, be somewhere, in the ballpark of where they were last year. That would take them to win out to hit those marks. But I think this is a team that's that's good enough to be a bowl team, to get to 6 wins. It's not going to be, there's no easy path, I don't think, to 6 wins, because I think we're still going to see, like we just said, that every game is they're going to be able to win or lose it. So I think the expectations are really just more of the same. I don't see, even the most winnable games, I'm not sure are great matchups for CU, and so I think it's going to be one of those second halves where you probably win a game or two that you're not expected to win, but you may also drop something that seems like a really bad loss.
Is this fun? Is parody fun? I haven't figured this out yet. It's fun when you're like kind of just like a non-biased observer, but like when you cover a team, man, it definitely makes you want to chew your fingernails a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. It's I'm like you. I don't know if it's fun, but it's interesting. There's, I think that, one of the things that has been frustrating more so than fun is I don't really know that we're seeing a whole lot of, across the board improvement in some areas where I expected to. And I know we're going to kind of get into positions and some individual players and some of that as we talk through this today. But that's been frustrating from my standpoint, is that I'm not sure that we're seeing the staff and the individual rooms, really take big steps forward. There's some individual players that I think have, but so it's equal parts, I think, fun and frustrating at this point.
How are you doing, man? Like, you've been there with me in the press box for every game, and we've had some late nights traveling, and you've got a full-time job. I got to check in with Sean Niehoff. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. This has been I almost don't know what to do with myself this week, to be honest. I've got so much free time on my hands that I haven't had in 2 months. So kind of lost for what to do with it. Sitting around on the couch, catching up on binging streaming some shows and catching up on some real life stuff. But I'm kind of ready to get back at it. I just wish we weren't back into another, late game next week, especially when you're traveling. I think that makes it tough. When you're on the road and they're late, that's even an extra, kick in the nuts. So.
Yeah, I try not to complain about it. It just like everybody on the beat has gotten sick this year.
Yeah,
I've gotten a couple different bugs, and it just your immune system is not happy when you stay up. As a 45, I'm going to be 46 tomorrow, year old, just staying up till 7 a.m. and then traveling. The immune system is like middle finger to you, man.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I caught a bug earlier in the season, and it took me 3 or 4 weeks to really shake it and to get over it. So it's, and jumping on airplanes and breathing recycled air on top of the, just stressing your body out does not help anything. So, but no, I'm doing good, and happy early birthday to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm curious, what individual buffs have surprised you the most, good or bad, through 7 games? 7 games.
I've actually, I think the biggest pleasant surprise that jumps out at me is Yaya. So I think Yaya Tia, he's really, especially for a freshman, for a redshirt freshman, and they're using him selectively, in mostly in that tight end role a couple times as just an extra lineman in an unbalanced set or what have you. But I think his play and his energy and his athleticism have really kind of jumped out the film for me, watching him live and watching it. And I think maybe I'm a hard grader or analyst when it comes to players, because I think I've got more players on my disappointed, surprised that they haven't taken the next step and developed list than I do on the good surprise list. I think Tawfiq Bayard, everybody's talked about him for the past several weeks, and he's really stepped up. But I kind of expected that, having watched his film previously. I think he's doing what I expected him to do. It's been a pleasant surprise to see some of the leadership traits emerge from him. But I think I've been disappointed that DJ McKinney has not taken a bigger step forward. And I know he was talked about just yesterday with Rob Livingston, and he brought him up and just said, hey, he's still young, still developing. But I kind of would have expected him to address some of the things that we saw last year and take a bigger step. It's been disappointing that they seem to have really missed on linebackers, and so that's been disappointing. I think Carter Stoutmire's lack of development and taking the next step has been a little disappointing. And then on the offensive side, I think I've been a little disappointed in some of the receivers. I mean, it's a very talented room. There's a lot of capability, but we haven't really seen Sincere Brown has a ton of potential and a ton of straight line speed, and there's ways to use him, but he hasn't really developed a more well-rounded game. We've talked for weeks about all the really high highs and really low lows that you get out of a guy like Omarion Miller. And again, it's and he's I think you'd expect more out of a junior, but then you look back at it too, and he just has not played a lot of football. But and with him, a lot of times it seems to be effort and attitude that kind of disappoint me on that. But I think I just feel even from a player perspective, that there hasn't really been that standout guy on either side of the ball that really makes you say, wow, we found something here.
Early in the season, Simeon Price completely shattered my expectations, and I was pretty bummed out when I saw him get hurt, just because I enjoy watching that young man run the football. It sounds like he's got a chance to get back at some point. DeKalen Taylor, I'm not sure if he's coming back this season, and hopefully he does, because he added a fun element to the mix. Absolutely. I'd have to go back and look and see if there's a medical redshirt option there. The O-line, I expected to be much better, but they've exceeded my expectations for sure, just as a group. And I know that's kind of cheating with this assignment here that I asked you about players, but just in general, that group, and from the negative, the cornerbacks room has definitely not been what we were hoping for, expecting out of this Colorado team. And you mentioned the linebackers, and Martavius French is a guy that he's got a lot of ability, but it just hasn't been very consistent so far this season.
Yep. No, I agree. And I don't know how much of that, with some of these players, how much of that is, is not being a great fit inside of the scheme. Is and with so much of it, especially defensively, but really on both sides of the ball, so much of all this stuff is interlaced, right? And so a lot of certain players in certain rooms, their performance is going to be in some ways dictated by the performance of other groups, and they the quarterback's always going to look like either the best player or the worst player on offense. And so much of it is dependent on what's around them. On defense, you look at the same thing. Like your linebackers are either going to be, they're either going to show up by making plays, or they're going to be the ones that show up by letting running backs run wild. And same thing with your quarterbacks. They're it's just tough. It's all interrelated and kind of interlaced. So it's I think what we're seeing out of the players is kind of the same thing that we're just seeing out of the team in the record right now.
Yeah. So this is the first of 2 bye weeks for the Buffaloes this year, and I know there's 7 games in, but this kind of feels like the midway point of the season from a grading standpoint. We're going to go position by position and grade each position, share kind of our thoughts on each one. Let's not go much further than just let's just dive in and go quarterback.
Okay.
What grade would you give the quarterback position in Boulder through 7 games?
A C. And I think that's just, yeah. There are times when it's been really good. There are times when it's been really bad. And I think one of the things that keeps it from being even higher than, just an average grade is kind of what we've talked about, throughout the season so far is really the fact that Caden Salter doesn't have natural leadership traits. He's not a real vocal guy. He's not he doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeve. And so he just at times gives the impression that he doesn't really care, good or bad, which I don't think is the case. I don't think you make it to that level without having that, but it's just, he's very subdued and internal and in some ways, I'm hoping that Juju learns some lessons and kind of takes some insight from what's happened with Salter, because I know those two are close this year, and understands that I think those are kind of his natural inclinations as well, is to be a little bit off to himself, not really embracing some of those traits, and I hope that he sees that and understands that that's something that he's going to need to develop over the next few years.
Yeah, I wrote all my grades down before, so we're gonna see how close we are.
And we can move through faster than that. I don't need to dialogue on everybody.
No. This is good. This is the bulk of our show, honestly, is just kind of going through these positions. I went with C with quarterback as well. And yeah, it's been, was it Robert Livingston? Yeah, it was Robert Livingston yesterday that said with Tawfiq not Tawfiq Bayard. He's been well. Who was talking about the highs of highs and lows of lows? DJ McKinney. DJ McKinney. Yeah. That's what Livingston was saying. And it's like the quarterback position is the epitome of that. The highest of highs, the lowest of lows. And I think if you're just grading off last week, hey man, B+, but you gotta have more of those B's going forward.
Absolutely.
If this team is going to make a bowl game this year. Running back position.
I think from the room standpoint, I've been relatively happy. I think I would grade the running backs with a B grade. There are still some things I'd like to see. I don't love the way that they use the room necessarily, and obviously injuries have hampered that to an extent. I think there are times where we've seen backs, really start to find a groove with some increased carries, but then the next series you come back and you're rotating back to a different guy. So I don't think that they've really let anybody, allowed anybody to get the hot hand in that room. I like the toughness that all of the backs seem to run with. I think that's one of Micah's big attributes. He's you can definitely see a difference with guys like Simeon Price and Dallin Hayden, however, in their vision. They seem to really see where the plays are developing and see where they need to make cuts. And a lot of times, you're still seeing Micah, miss holes and press the wrong areas of the front. But overall, I think they've done a good job. I'd give them a B.
Same grade on my list here. Definitely. That's been my frustration. At times, it just feels like they roll away from the hot hand. But it felt like in the second half against Iowa State, they realize Dallin Hayden is the guy, the workhorse to bring this team to victory. And we hope to see more of that going forward.
Absolutely.
Receiver position.
Receiver, I give the receivers a C as well.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of playmakers. I like what I see out of a lot of them at times, but part of this is that it's a very poor blocking group, and for the offense that they're trying to run, there are a lot of plays where there's just very minimal effort in that aspect of the game. And I don't think that, I think one of the things that's disappointed me is that they're not very good route runners. And again, I don't know how much of that is just offensive scheme, but they seem to really not understand what some of the concepts are designed to do, and so they're just a little lazy and unpolished. But I don't think they're a detriment to the team, but they haven't really been the standout room that I think they have the potential to be.
We're pretty close. I went C+ with the receivers room, and a big reason why I give them that tad bump is that those guys have made some tough catches this year. Omari Miller, Joseph Williams, guys that have readjusted to the ball deep downfield. And yeah, some of the consistency stuff from down to down isn't there, but you see the talent of that group show itself on a regular basis. Tight end position, what do you think there?
Tight end position is a solid D for me. That's from a room standpoint, that's probably my biggest disappointment. In that, I didn't realize. I know that when we came into the season, they talked a lot about the fact that that Zach Atkins had not really been asked to block before. He was a receiver in high school. He has a pass catching background. They haven't really utilized him that much in that regard, but he really had a long ways to go with his run blocking. And we haven't really seen a whole lot, and I think he's injured now, but we haven't really seen a whole lot of Savell Smalls either. And he's been hit and miss when we have seen him. I'm not sure that he's, made a big jump from where he was at last year. So I just don't, I don't know how much of that is the talent in the room and how much of it is just the utilization, but they definitely nothing to write home about.
I wouldn't see with the tight end position. It's kind of a results-oriented business, and at times Zach Atkins has just whipped on some blocks. Other times he's been very showing you that promise that makes you glad that he has another year of eligibility for sure. And if they can hang on to Gavin Mueller coming in, and you get some development out of Corbin Lazier, maybe you feel better about that position. And part of that is kind of a product of the system. It just isn't a position that is consistently thrown out there. I get you. Did you put Yaya Atia's production as a tight end in there? That might break the tie between me and your grades.
No, I did not. So I kind of lumped him in with the offensive line, and so.
Well, let's go to the O-line. What's your grade there?
So my grade on the O-line is a B. I think they've done some really nice things, but it's and that's one of those areas also where they you can have one of the 5 guys or one of the 6 guys if you're including Yaya when he's in there, but just one of them busts a play and it blows the entire thing up. But I've been very pleased with the improvement in that unit from last year to this year. I wish that these guys had another year coming back together, because I think they could be a really solid offensive line with some more time together, because now we'll be starting over with the bulk of that again next year. But yeah, I think a very solid B. I was kind of bordering on maybe a B+, but I don't know. Again, I'm a tough grader on a lot of stuff. So
I wouldn't B plus. I still have a little bit of PTSD from that UCLA game back in 23. Man, that was just rough. And this group has not been perfect, but to see this three-headed coaching monster come together, throw their egos at the door, and really do what's right for these young men, and build them up. I feel like that's a group that you can really see development taking form, and you finally figured out pretty much every spot on that offensive line now that you feel good about Larry Johnson III being your right tackle. So there's more continuity at that position really than any other position on the team, right? I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I
right?
think so.
That's the most continuity you have. And if you get to game 7 as a coaching staff and you feel good about your group, you kind of know the hierarchy. That's another thing, another feather in the cap for those guys in that coaching staff.
Yeah, and and they've had really good luck, but also toughness out of that room too. That the fact that you've had, after they did some of their shuffling bodies around the first few weeks, you've had these 5 guys that have showed up every week in and week out, and so you haven't had to deal with replacing guys and doing a lot of spot injury type stuff, and you've got guys like Zarian McGill that's been really banged up, but he's still showing up every week and playing through probably more hurt than injury, but showing that toughness week in and week out. So, and I think with this bye week off, that's one of those, that's a group that probably needed it.
Appreciate our sponsors as always on BuffStampede Radio. Let's hear from them, and then we're going to get back into our grades, and we're going to go position by position defensively. Is your business growing but not quite ready for a full-time CFO? Macaulay Capital offers fractional CFO services for companies doing more than $3 million in annual revenue. You get expert financial leadership without the full cost. Learn more about how you can improve your business's profitability and cash management at MacaulayCapital.com. If you know Boulder, you know the Hungry Toad. We've been serving this town since 1991, long before the lines on Pearl Street. Just north of campus, we're your local British pub with proper fish and chips, quality burgers, a scratch kitchen, real English cask ale, and no tourist fluff. We support CU football, women's soccer, and the loyal fans who keep it local. The Hungry Toad, Boulder born, Buffs proud. All right. Sean, you've been to the Hungry Toad.
I have.
Did you get some food there?
I'm sorry?
Did you get some food when we were there?
I did. I got fish and chips. So they do a very solid job with the fish and chips. That's always one of my, for a pub, that's always one of my hallmarks is if they can do good fish and chips, then pretty much everything's going to be good. But I was just thinking when we were watching that little spot that that's a place we need to get back to. We need to figure out how to do a little meet and greet or something again there.
Definitely. We're planning on that for sure. No, the Hungry Toad has been very hospitable towards BuffStampede.com. They keep supporting us. And so we got to get back there very soon. Let's go D-line next. This was a tough one for me, Sean.
Yeah, and when we're doing D-line, are we talking the entire D-line, or are we talking the interior and the edges separately, or
interior and edges separately? Yeah.
Okay. So the interior D-line, I think that's a group that I think is probably for me about a B-. I think there's what's kind of impressed me with that group is the ability to roll a number of players through. I think there's some really good depth out of that unit. I've been very pleased with Anquan Barnes in his improved play from last year. But there's also been, a I think that you do see, some continuing improvement with Davis Slane, and but early in the season there were, I think we talked about in some other recaps that there was a lot of freelancing going on inside of there, and so I think we've seen some of that be corrected, a little more gap integrity, but I think they've really done a solid job on the interior.
I went C plus, and part of it is kind of not their fault because there's been a lot of injuries up there, and thankfully they cultivated that depth. Sean, they brought in a lot of guys. There are some guys like Torian Carter that just have like fallen off the face of the earth and are just not part of the mix. And then you've got Davian Coleman and who am I forgetting on that had surgery as well. There's been a few guys that we expected to be part of that rotation that are out of the mix. And I thought Tawfiq Thomas was honestly coming on pretty well until he got hurt. So there's been injury issues there. But yeah, to me, the plus comes from Amari McNeil and what he's done the last couple of weeks. Because when that dude is locked in, he's really, really good.
Absolutely. And it's, I think the frustrating thing with him is that, and we saw it last season too, he finished the season so strong. But it's, whatever it takes to get him to that point of locking in, you just wish that switch could be flipped, sooner. And so again, even this season, he started off a little slow, was not, wasn't great in some of the early games and wasn't playing nearly as much. And then when he had to be inserted and start playing more and being counted on to start because of some of the injuries, he just really took off and he's played great. So
the edge group, thoughts there. This is another tough one because you've got this young emerging group and you've got these veterans that have been kind of in and out of the lineup dealing with injuries. What's your grade there?
So my grade with that group is a C plus. I think, and kind of for some of those reasons, I've been a little disappointed with I guess again the lack of a next step out of both Arden Walker and Keaton Wade. I think they've been solid, but the sack numbers are down quite a bit. They just haven't been able to finish. I think that there's been, I think that they get sometimes a bit of a bad rap with some of the run, the run defense. They've been asked to do a lot of different things this year than what they were doing last year. So a lot of the edge and containment issues have not really been on the ends. They've been having them spill a lot more against some of the schemes and the running quarterbacks that they've had. So they've been solid, but I'm really impressed and I'm super amped about the freshmen. So I think that those two guys have, they make freshman mistakes. And so you see that, from time to time as well, but just the physical presence and the want to that they play with and the high motor, it's exciting, especially to know that you're going to be able to watch and count on those guys for the next, 2 to 3 years.
I had B plus written down and then I revised it to C plus to match your grade there. And I took a second to reflect, and it was the B minus was excitement over the future more than it was about production through the first 7 games of this football season. And I just watching those IMG kids, London and Alexander, like it just keep them around in Boulder and they're going to be future NFL players down the road. That's the way it looks right now. So Arden hasn't quite lived up to what we expected, but he's been solid. And honestly, like I was semi-surprised when Keaton Wade got the start in the opener. And he's been pretty solid in that role. But, yeah, I mean, it just when you look at the number of run yards opposing teams have had against Colorado through the first 7 games, it's hard to give anybody in that front from a position standpoint more than a C+ at this point. But that's kind of where they are because they've done other good things.
Yep. No, absolutely. I think we're on the same page with that.
Linebacker. This is a tricky one.
Yeah. Linebacker for me, and when I first started this, I just went gut reaction and I wrote down F. I just thought that they had been horrible, and then I gave it some more thought, and I looked back at it, and I thought that was a little harsh, but I cannot give that group any more than a D+. It's I just think as a room, it has not been a productive room. It's been a disappointment. And, aside from the last 6 quarters, maybe, in terms of Jeremiah Brown and kind of maybe the lights come on for him a little bit and he's been able to flip that switch. But aside from that, it's just been, small parts and pieces of individual games where you've had individual players, kind of flash. So I think it's a room that was obviously a miss in the offseason and something that they're going to have to really address going into next year.
Yeah, I had a D initially, and I guess the excitement over what Jeremiah Brown did against Iowa State and Reginald Hughes, he's still got a lot of improvement to make, but there's something there. There is something there, and that gives me hope for the last 5 games. So I went C-.
Okay.
But that's kind of grading on the curve a little bit. Yeah, no, that group has not been great. Cornerback. I graded as C-. And again, that one took some reflection because I'm not sure how much of that has just been due to the injuries, and the fact that room has kind of been an infirmary with players rotating in and out. And I think right as RJ Johnson was kind of maybe getting his feet under him a little bit, he goes down and he's been on the injury report for the last, 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. So, so I think that they're obviously further down in that room, further down the depth chart than they would ideally, hope to be at this point in the season. But, as we talked earlier, I think DJ McKinney's just been a disappointment in terms of his development and taking a growth step from last year. So it's and they've the whole, if you count, and I'm not sure exactly where to count them in, but if you count Preston Hodge in with the cornerbacks, I think he's I don't know. He's been a bit of a disappointment almost because it seems, again, until the last week or two, that he's just a body, right now, that he doesn't seem to really have any fire and any intensity and leadership that I would have expected to see out of a guy that, especially coming back for almost for a surprise extra season because of some of the rulings with JUCO players and what have you. But yeah, so just they haven't been horrible, but very, very unimpressed. They're also not making any plays, Yeah, with Preston Hodge, he was an excellent leader all offseason during preseason camp. But I think when you're struggling, like as Coach Prime has said and other coaches, that it's hard to have their voice ring throughout the locker room
right.
if you're struggling, right? And that's why we've seen Tawfiq Bayard really emerge, and why Jordan Seaton can just, run his mouth in a leadership standpoint and be a positive influence for these other guys. And I gave the cornerbacks group a C- as well, which is probably the most disappointing grade if you were going to go back to preseason expectations, right?
Say that again.
A C- for the cornerbacks would probably be the most surprising grade 7 games into the season if you went back to the preseason.
Yeah, well, I think so, but I think there were also so many question marks coming in. I think part of it is because of how the staff hyped up DJ in the offseason, and I guess it wasn't just the staff either. There were just a lot of expectations, a lot of pundits, also. So that was there, but there was always the question about what were you going to do on the other side. There wasn't, you didn't have anybody really coming back that had seen a lot of time in that room, and so who was going to lock down that other side? And they're still going through that 7 weeks in, partially because of injuries, but I think partially because they're looking for the right players. So I don't think that maybe I had as high of expectations out of that room as other people did, but yeah, I think that you would have. I think you're right that probably for most people that's the biggest drop in preseason expectations to results.
What about the safety position? Your grade there?
Well, I think the emergence of Tawfiq Bayard has definitely just elevated that grade, and so I would give that room a B-. I think I think Tawfiq has played at a very high level. As mentioned earlier, I've been just disappointed with the development of Carter Stoutmire. And there are times where he just looks completely uncomfortable back there. And then there are other games where scheme-wise, they're able to do some different things with him, move him a little closer to the ball, and he looks a little more natural and plays well and shows you the potential that they see in him. And I think Ben Finiseth's been a solid third guy in when he's had to play. In some ways, maybe even overachieving the expectations of a walk-on guy from the Western Slope that's just really come in and worked for 4 years and done all that. But again, there's no depth there. And even this last week when you're having to run, significant playing time for a guy like John Slaughter out there, there's some issues on the back end.
I would B- as well. Tawfiq Bayard has been one of my favorite buffs very quickly to cover. I've heard a lot of stuff that, like, even off the record, just stuff that, like, he is really pushing this team as a sophomore and really galvanizing that group defensively. Now, Carter Stoutmire, man, I was the harshest critic on him through 4 games. I felt like he got like a little bit better and then got hurt. So hopefully he can come back and kind of build off the momentum he was dealing with. So we were pretty similar in our grades, not too dramatic.
Yeah, I think that's, and I doubt that we're probably too much different than anybody watching this is going to grade. I mean, I think that kind of where we came out on all this stuff is very reflective of a 3-4 team that also could be a 5-2 team. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Do you remember the over/under contest we used to do on BuffStampede.com, Sean?
I do not.
You do not? Okay. We're bringing it back for the upcoming game out at Utah. Okay. And Taco Bell is actually going to sponsor this. They're going to send out a free T-shirt with a CU player on the front for whoever wins this over/under contest coming up with Utah coming up on October 25th. We got about 10 days till that game, so we can catch our breath. I'm gonna throw that up on our BuffStampede.com message board on Monday, and folks can start to kind of put their votes in there. So hopefully we can get you part of that contest, because Taco Bell has done such a great job of supporting this podcast, and I know that was a contest that folks on BuffStampede.com really enjoyed back in the day.
Actually, and now that you said that, I was thinking more along the lines of over under, with like team wins and those sort of things. But I do remember now, like the weekly rushing yards or certain players, tackles or whatever. Yeah.
So okay. I've always enjoyed that. I didn't enjoy the calculating of the results. That was always fun, but coming up with the lines was always fun. So I'm going to have to do both this coming weekend. So who's primed for a breakout with the Buffaloes going forward?
Well, I hopefully, because I do think that he has underperformed and that there is, some opportunity to really finish the year strongly. I'm going to say, Caden Salter. He's been much maligned this, through the first part of the season. I don't think he's played as poorly outside of the 3 interception game as a lot of people see, but he also hasn't grabbed the, either the leadership, aspect or the, putting the team on his back aspect and going and winning games that I would have expected out of him. And so I think there's an opportunity for that in the second, or not the second half, but in the last 5 games. And so that's the one that I'm hoping for, that he's primed to take that next step, to be the Caden Salter that that he was at Liberty, and help take this team to a bowl.
He's a second-year Buff, but I think Joseph Williams is Colorado's best receiver right now. And I think that's, yes, take your shots to Sincere Brown downfield, get Omari and Miller involved, and you get Traylon Miller back, probably back in the backfield. He's another breakout candidate in the second half of the season. But Joseph Williams, to me, is somebody that he reminds me of Jordan Tyson a little bit. Do you see that at all?
Absolutely. It's, big frame, big body, sneaky speed, but really, really consistent, really good hands. And I do think he's the most polished of all the receivers on the team in terms of his route running and the best combination of short area burst plus downfield speed and route running and hands. And so I think he's the complete package. And now that you don't want it to take 7 weeks, but it seems like now that the receivers, and especially JoJo and Salter, are kind of maybe syncing up and getting on the same page, I think there could be some big things out of that duo.
Yeah. Let's rank the difficulty of Colorado's upcoming conference slate from most winnable to least winnable as things look currently. There's a couple that are pretty obvious, but a couple that are pretty tough to rank here.
Yeah.
Most winnable, you got to start at West Virginia, right?
Absolutely.
On November 8th?
Absolutely. I think that is by far the most winnable game on the schedule, but it's also a game that causes you some concern with the style of offense that they run and going against a running quarterback. So I think it's the most winnable game, but I would not kid myself into saying it's going to be an easy game either.
Yeah, none of these are, but they're all winnable. They really are. Every one of these 5 games we're going to talk about. The second most winnable game in your mind, Sean, is?
Probably surprisingly, I'm going to say Kansas State.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm just worried about the weather out there
yes.
in late November. That's what I'm worried about.
The wind will be blowing. You can count on that. So.
And
But
then
yeah,
I had next Arizona on November 1st.
Okay.
Well, what did you have third?
And Arizona would be my third. Yeah. So.
Okay. Then I went Arizona State. I don't think there's a whole lot separating those Arizona schools, though. Like Arizona's better than I thought. Arizona State a touch less better than we thought. But I had Arizona State like number 4 on my preseason poll because Cam Scattaboo was like just the heart and soul of that football team, and he's gone now. So I think those are kind of splitting hairs between those Arizona schools coming to Colorado.
Yep. No, I agree. And that's where, and I would sit with Arizona State, as the 4th most winnable game as well. Very solid team, solid program at this point. And Sam Levitt's is a really good young quarterback. So there's, and I think that there are some matchup problems with Arizona State. Quality of team, I agree with you, kind of where they sit, very similar to Arizona, but I'm not sure that the style, really suits the Buffs, tremendously.
And that leaves Utah. I guess we agree on that. That's the most difficult game coming up on the schedule, and it's the next game coming out of this bye week. That's a tough football team. Texas Tech's the only team that's really laid it to them early on this season, and you've got a dual threat quarterback. A lot of stuff to worry about coming up here after the bye week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing is that it's just a really bad matchup for CU, I think, from a style perspective and where, what they do. So it's going to be the biggest challenge remaining. I'm kind of glad that it's the next challenge because I would have worried about it maybe, a few weeks ago because there was the question of, how is this team going to handle the lack of success? And you kind of worried that they maybe just turtle and you lose the team and everything snowballs in the wrong direction. But I think they've, the staff's done a good job of keeping them together, and you've seen the players step up like Tawfiq Bayard and a couple other guys that have stepped up and started really just pulling this team in the right direction. So I think it's a good time to be coming off a bye, coming off of a win, having some good feelings in the room to really hit them right out of the gate. I think that's maybe a better opportunity than if we were closing the season again with Utah.
Yeah. Well, we got a little time to get ready for that game. Sean, I always appreciate you for joining the podcast. Great insights into everything. And thanks as always for being there and handling the beat writing responsibilities while I'm running around doing all these video things that I'm asked to do during the football season.
Absolutely. Nothing I would rather do for 3 months during the fall. So.
Well, we appreciate you, Sean, and we appreciate everybody out there for tuning in. Thank you. In case you haven't heard, CU Athletics is teaming up with Taco Bell this season, launching the first ever $7 Buffs box, which is available at participating Colorado Taco Bell locations. What's in the Buffs box? A lot of great stuff. You get 4 Taco Bell classics, a cheesy gordita crunch, a beefy 5-layer burrito, a Doritos Locos Tacos, cinnamon twists, and the meal comes with a signature Buffs collectible cup featuring either Julian Juju Lewis, Jordan Seaton, Draylon Miller, or Quentin Gibson. And this isn't just about the food. Every single CU touchdown this year means more than points. Taco Bell will donate $1,000 for every Buffs touchdown to the Golden Buffalo Scholarship Fund. Nothing better than crushing a Buffs box while watching the Buffs light up the scoreboard. Live Moss.